like every other market day. Everyone was busy buying and selling, with buyers bargaining and complaining. It was just like a usual market day until something unexpected happened. Make una help her, oh, was the noise that came from one side of the market as a pregnant woman who was buying tomatoes had gone into labor. The pregnant woman called Ekema was rushed by some market women to the hospital, which was just 3 streets away from the marketplace. That afternoon, as Ekema was brought into the hospital, she was kept at the reception, as the hospital receptionist had told the market women and the driver who brought her in to make deposit before she could be attended to. The good Samaritans were contemplating amongst themselves on how to raise a sum of 200,000 as a deposit so that Ekema can be attended to, as they had tried reaching her husband, but his line was off and there was no other family member's phone number they could reach out to. The whole hospital was thrown into confusion as Ekema had begun to lose strength as she had started bleeding and was gradually becoming unconscious. While in the midst of all that, an old couple entered into the hospital. The husband, who was in his late 40s, whose name was Akuna, was holding his wife by her wrist as she was also in labor. Akuna was quickly directed to the cashier's office where he made payments for his wife's delivery. He was quickly attended to and taken to the delivery room. Within few minutes, the doctor came out with a beaming smile written all over his face and announced to Mr. Akuna that his wife had given birth to a bouncing baby boy. The man jumped up for joy as he held the doctor's shoulders in excitement. He almost threw down the doctor. Mr. Akuna and his wife had been married for 12 years but had been unable to have any children of their own. It had been a living hell for both of them, especially his wife, as she was constantly mocked at any given opportunity by her neighbors and even by her family members. The couple had almost given up when suddenly Mr. Akuna's wife Ugoma fell ill and she was diagnosed that she was pregnant for the very first time after so many years and wasted efforts. Joy then returned to the couple's home and Ugoma had a smooth pregnancy journey. Emma, who was still in the reception hall, gave a loud shout as she screamed in pain. She was in pain and was losing strength. Doctor, she screamed, please don't let me die and don't let me lose my baby. Her screams caught the attention of Mr. Akuna as he quickly asked her, woman, what is still keeping you here? One of the market women had to quickly reply him as Ekema couldn't speak out loud enough. She told Mr. Akuna all that had happened. As he heard it, he quickly told the doctor to attend to her while he made the necessary deposits. Emma was rushed to the delivery room. After 2 hours of struggle in the delivery room, she finally delivered a baby boy. With a faint glance, she had a look at her baby, then she slept off. Akuna's wife had some complications after childbirth, which had to force them to spend extra 2 days in the hospital. But before then, Mrs. Ugoma, Mr. Akuna's wife, had asked that she saw her baby. The husband had to then inform the nurses about his wife's requests. The nurse who was on duty had to go to the children's ward to bring their baby, as the baby was earlier taken away for cleanup and for his first bath. By the time the nurse got to the children's ward, she saw 2 baby boys sleeping soundly close to each other, but there was no tag or any means of identifying which baby was which. The nurse had resumed duty that evening, as the previous one who was on duty during the afternoon period, who kept the babies there, had closed for the day and had gone home. So she had to nonchalantly carry the baby, who laid by the right hand side, and took him to Mr. and Mrs. Akuna. By this time, Ekema had gotten across to her husband and he had come to the hospital and had completed the payments. He asked about the man who helped with the deposits for his wife's delivery and he was taken to Mr. Akuna. He thanked Mrs. Akuna and Mr. Akuna greatly and also said congratulations to the couple. Ekema and her husband left the hospital that same day with their baby. When Mr. Akunna and his wife got home, there was celebration in the air as people trooped into the house of Mr. Akunna and his wife to see their baby. A big party was hosted by the family as people from far and wide came to celebrate with them. They named their son Chizaramekbere, meaning God has answered my prayers. 10 years later, Mr. Akunna was transferred for job purposes to another city called Dankwa. So him and his family had to move as well. The family were doing well financially and otherwise until a day when evil befell them. Ekema and her husband named their son Obumneke. Obumneke grew up to be a fine and hard-working young man. He was the first and only son of his parents. Obum, as he was fondly called, became the breadwinner of the family as he engages in any legal trade or business to ensure that he puts food on their table. One day, while he was on his way to a site, as he was part of the laborers contracted to mold blocks for a building, he saw some group of men who looked like criminals carrying a man whose hands were tied and head covered with a cloth. The sight of what he saw got him afraid, and so he had to hide behind a tree and watch closely as the kidnappers carried the man who they had kidnapped into an uncompleted building. Obum carefully followed them and saw how they tied the man up to a chair. One of the thieves said to the man, "Because as it be like this now, we need 20 million naira, unless we go kill you." The man who was tied up started pleading. He said, "Please don't kill me. I will give you what you want. You have my phone with you. Please call my wife," the man said amidst tears, as the face cover had been removed from his face. One of the kidnappers who was holding the man's phone handed the phone over to one of them who looked like their leader. He called him Gabon. While handing him the phone, he said, "Gabon, see the phone here." The man collected the phone and dialed it and said, "Hello, as I dey call you now, we hold your husband for here. If you wan see am again, bring 20 million, come for Pablo Junction," he said and ended the call. The phone rang again, but he ignored. The phone kept ringing, and by the third time it rang, Gabon picked it up and said in anger, "No call this line again, oh, except you want make we kill am here. And make I tell you, no even try involve police, oh, except you go just buy your husband here, sharp sharp," he threatened. The kidnappers were a total of 3 in numbers. So Gabon ordered one to go out with him, and while he ordered the one who looked like the youngest but the deadliest among them to watch over their victim. While all this was going on, Obumneke kept himself hidden at one end of the building as he looked at what transpired in pity and fear. As soon as he saw the 2 kidnappers leave, he quietly went in carefully. He hid in one of the rooms in the uncompleted building while he monitored his surroundings. He then noticed that the one who was monitoring the kidnapped man was holding a wooden weapon. After careful observation, he looked around him and saw a big abandoned log of wood. Then he followed through the back of the thief and hit him with the log of wood on his head. The kidnapper immediately fell down and became unconscious. He then proceeded to the tied man and loosed him up quickly. The both of them fled the building unnoticed before the other kidnappers could come back. Few minutes later, Gabon and the other kidnapper came back, but to their greatest surprise, they saw their member on the floor and their victim was nowhere to be found. By then, Obum and the man he rescued had boarded a vehicle and fled the environment. Once they arrived at a bus stop, they alighted from the vehicle and the man introduced himself as Mr. Akunna and gave Obum his number and also invited him to his house at Dankwa. Though Obum told him he may not be able to come as he does not have enough money for transportation, But Mr. Akuna pressured him and told him that he would send his driver to pick him up. Then they parted ways. Mr. Akuna hurriedly went home and met his wife, who was already surrounded by people, crying and wailing, and his only son Chizaram beside her, trying to console her as well. The entire family and the people around were thrown into joy and happiness as they laid their eyes on Mr. Akuna. He then narrated his ordeal to them, and they continued in their jubilation. Obumneke went straight back home. He then narrated to his family what he encountered earlier that day. The family was thrown into panic and fear from what he told them. His mother, Ekema, said to him, "My son, what you did today was very brave and you did the right thing. But please, my son, next time, be more careful. What if the kidnappers had gotten up with you? What would have been our fate?" she asked with fear and concern written all over her face. His father added, "Please, my son, next time, mind your business. As you know, you are the only one assisting me to ensure that there is food in this house. Please be careful. This world is filled with evil people, and I do not want to bury any of my children." Obumneke then assured his family that he will be more careful and ensure to stay out of harm's way next time. He further told them that he was invited to Dankwa by the man he saved. His parents still told him to be careful, as nobody is to be trusted. 2 days after the incident, Obumneke went to see Mr. Akuna, and just as promised, Mr. Akuna sent his driver to pick him up. Obumneke could not believe his eyes once he stepped into the compound. It was like a palace, as the place was well decorated with beautiful flowers and nice paintings on the wall. He was warmly welcomed by Mr. Akuna and his family, as Mrs. Ugoma has been anticipating to see the man who saved her from being called a widow. He was ushered to the dining, where many varieties of food were arranged on a well-furnished and beautiful table. He literally felt like he was dreaming as he kept smiling uncontrollably. As they dined and enjoyed their meal, Mrs. Ugoma asked him, "Young man, so what do you do for a living?" Obumneke answered, "I engage into any legal jobs that I come across, as I have to support my old parents to put food on the tables, and I have younger siblings." Mr. Akuna then asked him, "Will you like to work for us as our house security? We will pay you very well," he assured him. He said that because they just wanted him around them so as to pay him back for saving his life. Without hesitation, Obumneke accepted, as he had longed for a better paying job. That night, as he was driven back home, he kept thanking God in his heart. Once he entered into his house, he broke the good news to his parents, who were so excited as well. Though his mother was a bit sober, as her only son will be moving out of their house and will be in another city far from them. But she consoled herself, as she knew that it was for the betterment of the entire family. Obumneke moved in with the Akunas, and he was warmly received and given a very comfortable room. He was assigned his responsibility, which was not so taxing. He lived in peace and harmony with the family, as well as other house assistants just like him in the house. He was greatly loved by all. Mr. Akuna even takes him along with him for some important meetings and travels, but this made Mr. Akuna's son Chizaram to begin to envy Obumneke, as he began to worry that he may steal inheritance from him. Chizaram began to show negative attitudes towards Obumneke, who became worried and wondered if he had wronged Chizaram in any way, as his mind was pure and had only love and appreciation for the family. 3 years after Obumneke joined the Akuna's family, Mrs. Ugoma was diagnosed with a rare medical condition that made her lose blood, as her blood was drying up, but there was no medical treatment for it. She was admitted into the hospital and stayed there for 4 months, as she was constantly in need of blood transfusion at least twice a week. On the fifth month of her stay in the hospital, it happened that the hospital ran out of blood and was in desperate need of blood for Mrs. Ugomma, as the only last one administered was gradually drying up. Mrs. Ugomma was almost giving up before the doctor called her family, who rushed to the hospital along with Obumneke. The doctor told them that their blood had to be tested, and the hospital was short of blood and no donor was available at the moment. Mr. Akuna and his son Chizaram was tested for blood compatibility with that of Mrs. Ugomma, his wife, but none of their blood was compatible. In short, it was then that they proceeded to test for their genotype and found out that Chizaram's genotype was different from that of his parents. This brought confusion to the doctor and Mr. Akuna as well. But due to the urgency of the situation at hand, they had to drop the matter and called on Obumneke, who was waiting at the reception, to also get tested for the donation.
What do you think will happen? Will Obumneke's blood match? What if they don't find a donor? Will Mrs. Ugomma make it out alive? All this will be answered by the next episode. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe and like. Let's hear your comments. Thank you.